Hello and welcome all back to Election Time News America. Today is Sunday, July 20th, 2025. We're going to be going over the 2026 United States midterm elections with this beautiful line here. And we're going to be looking at what might happen if the midterms were held today. This is going to be all based off of current polling and information. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Just wrapped up the elections for Tasmania that happened yesterday. I'll be giving a review video in 2 days. Also, make sure to follow the Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X. I make posts about news and new videos and more context, all of that, especially with articles on Substack. Make sure to follow all of those below if you are on any of those platforms, especially the Substack. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So now, I'm going to the video, 1 minute intro. All right, perfect. So House of Representatives elections. We also are going to have Senate elections, gubernatorial, Senate, and House elections. That should be in that order. The entire House will be up. Now we have undeterminate maps officially in Ohio, but even though most likely that will end up being the exact same as it was in 2024, just because of how its system is run. Texas might be redrawn. Same with California, unfortunately, with a gerrymandering war. But the Senate is going to be the exact same. This is the map, except we have a few more incumbents retiring. The total is now up to that's seven retirements so far, and it might even get more. So that is, in fact, going to be interesting. Also, there's a few incumbencies and vacancies. That vacancy is going to get filled, most likely with a Democrat, but officially that is going to be vacant until for a little while. That primary happened just the other day, so most likely that is going to be a Democrat winning that seat. So, all right, start things off. Typically, midterms are bad for the party in power. These are the midterm nets in Congress for the past, I believe this is 12 cycles from 20, including 2022, going all the way back to 1978. So this is a very consistent pattern. How many seats in the House and Senate were gained and lost by the party that is in the White House? So 2022, Democrats lost 10 Senate House seats. They gained one in the Senate, though. The Senate is a bit different, but still more of the time they are lost. You can see more of the time Senate seats are lost by the party in power, but the House is very consistent. And sometimes very, very far. In 2018, the last time that Trump was in office, Republicans lost 41 House seats in the House. That was quite a bit of a blowout. You could say here, I mean, you had quite a few seats flip. Every single Democratic incumbent won re-election. So all of the seats that flipped, that was Tim Walz's seat. He retired to run for governor. I forget exactly what happened, but Nolan retired there, and all of the ones in Pennsylvania were due to redistricting from this map to the one that was redrawn here. None of them are actual losses. So every single Democrat actually won re-election in 2018, and that was a D+8 national environment. But even then, Republicans gained 2 seats in the Senate, and that's because of the uh, configuration of the Senate at that time. You had Indiana, Missouri were trending very hard to the right. North Dakota, same sort of thing. And the last time it happened was 2012, which was a very strong blue wave year. The Democrats also they actually won the Senate vote by 8 because they had California in there by 25, but they also won Florida by 13, New York by 45. Casey won in Pennsylvania by 9, Stabenow in Michigan by 21, Baldwin by 5.5, Klobuchar by 35, and they actually managed to hold on. Donnelly flipped in Indiana. McCaskill won re-election in Missouri. And Heitkamp narrowly won re-election in North Dakota, which is trending very hard to the right. So at 2018, this was almost completely settled. This was the West Virginia flip for 2024. This was the West Virginia of 2018. Everyone knew that Heitkamp was going to lose re-election. 10.8 actually was relatively strong performance. And actually, it's not like the Democrats didn't lose anything. This was the only one that they really lost, was Florida. They could have won in Florida if they had put more resources into it, and if the Florida Democratic Party hadn't collapsed after 2016. But Indiana and Missouri were essentially done for at that point. Braun was going to flip that. He was the governor for a while, so he was relatively popular. And Hawley was going to flip Missouri. Those were essentially set in stone, but they flipped Arizona and Nevada. Jackie Rosen and Kirsten Sinema both flipped their seats there. So those are going to go towards their column, but they did still end up losing 2 seats in total there. And in 2022, it's the same sort of situation where you had basically no flips. They failed in Nevada. That's the only one that they really failed in. Kelly, there wasn't necessarily that strong. Georgia, Warnock was it was relatively close. They could have potentially knocked him off there. But they did lose in Pennsylvania, but that was only mainly because of the retirement of Pat Toomey. He wasn't necessarily a hugely popular candidate, but his retirement basically opened up a seat, and John Fetterman did actually flip that seat. That was the explanation to that. But basically, other than that, every single other time, and the largest flip was 63 seats gone to the Republicans in the House in 2010. That was a huge red wave year, like so, which I haven't seen in a long time. It's a lot of stripes. Both of the Dakotas actually had Democrats, and yes, that is current. Kristi Noem, who is currently the that is a gerrymandered map right there. Holy cow! That is who is currently the secretary in Trump's current administration. But there's a lot of flips, and this was basically the set in stone, the beginning of the Republican Tea Party, and also, wow, when's the last? This was probably the last time. Yes, this was the last time that Republicans had a majority of the House seats in Illinois. They had a few weird ones. These were most likely drawn to benefit Democrats, but then it actually ended up turning into a dummy mander because of how strong of a year it ended up being. Because I mean that's a 10-point shift in the popular vote. So, yeah, I mean compared to 2008, 2010, I think most likely 2008 was the last time that more of the actual land in the United States of America, except maybe, it depends on how much out here really there is, but this might have been the last time that there was more land area in the United States of America that was in a Democratic House district than a Republican one. Because since then, it has consistently been the urban regions that have really been a bit bluer. And so these vast red regions out here have all been Republican, even though there's not as many people, which is why it's competitive still. There's just that many people out there. So, that much land out there. Moving on to get to what we're going to be looking at here. There's a lot of term limited people. Mostly the only ones that aren't term limited. I don't think there's actually a single retirement happening on the gubernatorial level. Every single, other than not Joni Ernst, that's the, Kim Reynolds is retiring in Iowa, which actually will help because she was very unpopular, and that was absolutely going to hurt the Republicans this time around if she hadn't retired. She's the only one that was actually underwater in the entire country. And so, based on that, let's see, can we get this real quick? There we are. That's very poor quality, but this is the overall, and she's the only one that's underwater. -5, Kim Reynolds. She is the only one that's retiring. We have a few that are very, very low, including Tina Kotek, who is running for re-election. Janet Mills is only by 7. So she's actually, interestingly enough, the best candidate the Democrats have to run for Senate. But there's quite a few. Ron DeSantis only at 13. But then, interestingly enough, the most popular candidate, the most popular governors in the country for both parties, the Vermont and Kentucky, have the quote-unquote wrong party governor. Phil Scott in Vermont won by 52 points on the same ballot that Kamala Harris won the state by over 30. And then we also have Andy Beshear in Kentucky, who won by 5. A year later, Donald Trump would win the state by over 25. So that's just something really interesting, is that split ticketing does sometimes work. Number 9 is Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Brian Kemp is number 5. Josh Stein is number 4, 38%. So those competitive states are pretty far out there. Interestingly enough, Tony Evers, who's most likely going to do relatively well, is actually all the way down at 15%, number 36. Tim Walz, 17%, number 32. You can pause if you want to see any more. I'm going to be moving on. So, what we have is going to be a repeat cycle of the same states as 2022, and the same Senate seats as 2020, with the exception of the special elections. And then we also have the same House as 2024 because it goes every single 2 years. What important statistics are we going to be looking at? The approval ratings. So first off, where we're going to go with governors, just to get this out of the way, is that 8 to 6 is going to be the most likely scenario, because most likely Sciarelli is going to lose in New Jersey to Sherrill. That's the most likely scenario. The only poll they have out is plus 21. Only 621 adults, 5.4 margin of error, but that's well outside of the margin of error. Personally, on my ranking, I do actually have her only winning by 6.7, which is still definitely an improvement from where it was definitely an improvement from where it was in 2021. Murphy only won re-election by 3.2 against Sciarelli. That would actually be a worse performance for Sciarelli this time around, but still, that's a very strong performance. Most likely going to be Democratic. And Spanberger is doing very well against Earl Sears. There's 2 more polls done recently. This one very, very recently. VCU, Spanberger leading by 12. I have her winning currently right now by 8.8. So that is going to end up most likely being Democratic. So that's going to be a flip going into the 2026 midterms for the Democrats, but they are still going to be down behind right now. They're only going to gain 1 governor. Right now it is 27-23. So then it'll be 26-24, which means that they need to flip 2 governorships in order to take control of the majority of governors' mansions. In the Senate, they will start off with a majority to start off 34-31, but it is starting out at 53-47. They will need to flip 4 seats to take a majority in the Senate. And so now, based on how things are going right now, that might not be that unplausible. Direction of country is starting to collapse again, except it does every single time, not that long after, typically around the end of August. So that's starting to come up. We're seeing the exact same patterns that we were seeing in the Biden administration. It's probably going to start going, if I had to guess, it'd probably spike right back up right over the course of August, and then once we hit September, we're going to be hitting negative 30 again. So that seems to be the pattern here that's going on continually. We saw this also in the first Trump campaign. It was a bit weirder. It was a bit slower of a general increase from March into August. But this is basically the exact same pattern that we saw for the Biden administration. And it's probably going to peak right around the midterms. Interestingly, then it collapsed right before then. So we'll have to see how that ends up going, how that can be a pattern. But President Trump's job approval, the most recent poll that just includes the numbers from right around the most recent scandals, which I'll be getting to in a minute, has minus 13 and minus 2. So those are very interesting numbers there. We also have Rasmussen plus 2, but that's Rasmussen minus 11 from Economics YouGov. So excluding Rasmussen, these are basically all going to average out to be minus 8.5 or so. So I think it's probably going to collapse to just under minus 10 on average within the next few weeks, especially with how people are seeing that he's been handling this. He also has passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, HR 1 is just shorter to say, so HR 1 with 60% opposing, only 38 in favor, as well as with the recent Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Only 40% of Republicans approve of the way that the Trump administration is handling the Jeffrey Epstein files. 36% disapprove. Democrats are 83-2, and independents are 71-11. So that's a huge lack of support from the independents, which are actually the only group that right now is growing in partisan support nationwide. Um, in the past month, Democrats gained, I think it was about 4,000 voters. Republicans gained about 1,000, and independents actually gained, I think, about 7,000. So independents are continuing to grow. There is wow. Okay, there is apparently some growth against the two-party system again, which has been continuing to be on the rise, as I believe that most people are generally seeing, um, are being more and more discontent with how the Trump administration is doing, as is seen by this slow increase, but also aren't approving of how the Democrats are handling the opposition. So I think with that, there's going to be a lot more of a drive towards the independents. And then you also look at the job approval again, is going to be continuing to drop. So, but if it was held right now, here's the interesting thing: Trump Biden states, all of them are under -10, except for Georgia, where it's -9.3. But every single District of Columbia -73, but they also have a lot of federal job layoffs. Virginia -8.8, which is actually weirdly enough higher than any of the Biden Trump states. But Indiana -4.8, Missouri, he's underwater, Iowa -9, Ohio -7, North Carolina -9.3, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Kentucky, West Virginia, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and Alaska are the only states where he is above water. So all of these other competitive states, Maine 17.5. So depending on how things go, this could really end up, and with 2024 voters, it's a bit different, but this is based off of, this is more likely to be voters, but then it's actually going to be more Trump tilted because they would only generally go out to vote for Trump. So this is actually going to be a bit redder than you might expect. Vermont actually gets redder, which is interesting. But Ohio just barely above water, Iowa just barely above water, North Carolina, Arizona barely. These three, right? So this is actually going to be a bit redder, a bit more supportive of Trump than the midterm electorate's likely to be, because Trump has a unique ability to be able to get out Republican voters. They are now generally the more low propensity party. So, and again, another poll about the Epstein files: 17% approve, 54 disapprove, 29 unsure / did not answer, and that includes 35% to 30% disapprove, and independents are 52% against. And almost a majority of Americans think that the government is hiding the client list and information on his death. So all of those are potentially concerning and may continue to build, but as of right now, it might end up being at the worst that it's going to be. It might actually end up just continuing to build. So, with all of that as pretext to this, we're going to start off with the gubernatorial election. So, we're going to be doing the 5 scale, which is going to end up being a very strong performance, 11 or more points. Likely a strong performance, but not secure, 8 to 11. Probable, which is going to be the middle range, 5 to 8. Lean, 2 to 5. Tilt, very slim victory. So, with all of that, then we can start with the safe states. They're going to be by 11 or more points. These are not going to be concerning at all. These are all going to be generally states that are, not very competitive. But some of them are going to be a bit interesting. First off, it's going to be the state of California. While it's not necessarily going to be, a strong performance by California standards, and this actually is a term-limited state. Gavin Newsom's term-limited here for 2026. It's a strong Democratic state where the PVI is 22.3. So the Republicans would have to win by over 10 points nationally in order to get that down to 10 points, with the exception of for a generic Republican versus a generic Democrat. Then we're going to be moving over towards Colorado. This is likely another strong one that's going to be continuing here, even though Jared Polis is term limited. This is not going to be that competitive of a race. Plus, Michael Bennet is getting into the race. He is a U.S. Senator. He's going to have to spend a bit of his war chest, likely, against the Attorney General. But the Republican primary, there's no real strong candidates, so this is basically going to end. This would end up definitely being a very safe state. This would certainly come in above double digits. Illinois, what we're going to be looking at here is going to be, that's the Senate. J.B. Pritzker did announce that he is running for re-election. He won in 2022 by 12 and a half. So that is, in fact, going to end up being a strong margin. Most likely nationally would be more Democratic friendly. So he would end up probably pulling in an 11-plus point win. Interestingly enough, Pennsylvania is in this list. Josh Shapiro, I pointed out, was one of the more popular governors. I did close that. But he won his first election by 14.8 in 2022. If the environment is more favorable towards Democrats, then there's very little chance that he would be not winning by double digits on the map. Obviously, safe are going to be Massachusetts, Maryland, Rhode Island, Connecticut. Rhode Island is interesting because relatively unpopular governor. I do need to actually find that real quick. Relatively popular governor. And so from that, it's going to be a bit difficult to, here we go. Relatively unpopular governor, the least popular governor above water, Dan McKee, but he did win even then in 2022 by 19. Lamont only won by 13 in 2022, but again, if it's going to be a more Democratic favorable year, Lamont isn't necessarily unpopular. He's actually kind of up in the he's actually relatively popular. He's number 9, 32% approval rating. So it's actually a very strong approval rating there. So he's going to easily be able to win re-election. Hawaii's another one, very blue state still. Green won by 26. That is, I believe, yeah, term limited. Kansas. I don't know where I read that from. Josh Green is not term limited, probably running for re-election. So that is going to be a safe race there as well. For the Republicans, starting things off, we just have Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, and Vermont. So those are very interesting balance of states here. Starting off in Vermont, because that's the weird one. Again, we have a very popular governor incumbent, Phil Scott, 58% approval rating. Had this for the in 2022, he won by almost 50. I don't really know why I have this out, really. But he won recently in 2024 by 51.6. So even in a favorable government towards Democrats, like it was in 2022, more like, he still won by 47. So he's going to win by a strong margin. Interestingly, we're going to be next going down to Alabama as Kay Ivey is term limited, but we have the retirement of the Republican incumbent senator. He is going to be running for Tommy Tuberville is running for governor. He's a relatively well-liked senator. I have no expectation whatsoever that he wouldn't be able to do well in Alabama. Next, we have the likely states. These are going to be between 8 and 11 points, so there's pretty strong margins. To start one off with a flip, we're going to start off with the state of Kansas. This is one that has been going pretty strong for Democrats for a while. We had the flipping of the state in 2018 due to the huge blue wave, but Kelly was also a very strong candidate. Meanwhile, this time now we have amongst voters, Trump has a net approval rating. Even amongst all adults, he's only at negative 4.7. While, let's see if I can find, Laura Kelly has relatively strong approval ratings. Her, specifically her, the minority leader and the lieutenant governor of Kansas might end up running. This would probably be the best candidate that they could get. David Tolan, the lieutenant governor currently under the administration, but I'm not 100% sure that it's going to go that well. Collier, being the former governor of Kansas, is probably going to do very, very well, as obviously he was the former governor, but this is really going to be a contested race, but potentially more so than it should be. and it's probably going to go in the likely column, probably closer to 8 than anything else, but it is definitely almost certainly going to flip even in the current environment. Next up, we have Texas. This is a pretty strong one. No term limits in Texas. Greg Abbott is likely going to run for re-election. He's going to win probably by a good amount. He won by 11 in 2022. I expect he's probably going to win by just under that, considering it's probably going to be a definitely more favorable national environment. If you look at 2018, he won by 13 and a half, interestingly enough. That was before his approval ratings kind of dropped. I think he's one of the slightly lower ones. Yeah, Greg Abbott's only at positive 10. So he's one of the worst governors as far as approval ratings go, but it is Texas, and there's no real strong Democratic field yet. Also on the likely list is going to go, Nebraska actually is safe on the governor's list. I missed that up because of the Senate, but Pillen is probably going to run for re-election and win by probably about, somewhere around 20 points or so on that level. So then likely we probably actually are going to have New York. I expect New York is probably going to stay likely just on a different level. Here was 6.4. I bet it's going to be closer to around 10 come election day. If it happened right now, Hochul would probably win by around 10, even though she's pretty unpopular, only positive 10. But that's generally just because if you look at the recent poll here, Hochul was crushing Stefanik, but there's a lot of undecided. So you see 47-24, that doesn't add up close to 100 at all. Lawler versus Hochul, she was winning by 20, and Blakeman by 25. So as of right now, she appears to be doing okay. Hochul was winning against the Democratic primary. Stefanik is winning in the Republican primary. Lawler, I think, announced that he's not going to run. I don't remember exactly. LePage actually is beating Golden in the race here, interestingly enough. But so that's probably going to end up being likely at the end of the day there. I don't expect that's going to be that concerning. Grisham, I believe, is term limited. And so, yes, term limited. I don't think there's really that much of a field here as of right now. Yeah, not really. But former U.S. representative for the first congressional district. Most likely, this is going to end up who's getting it. Allen. So that's going to be the from 2019 to 2021, and so she won by 2019 to 2021 is going to be down here. So that says O'Halloran. Not 100% sure. Oh, I was looking at the wrong state. Okay. Yep. Halland. So 22.8 comparatively, and then it swaps over to 16.4 in 2020. So that's not terrible, but it's not like an insanely strong performance. I'd expect that's probably only going to end up being lean at the end of the day, probably a probable. That's going to be 5 to 8 points by the end of the night or so. Not going to be anything huge. Arizona is going to be definitely a bit closer, because Katie Hobbs isn't a hugely popular candidate, but there's not really anybody that's huge. Andy Biggs is definitely going to be a bit of a difficult challenge here. I do actually have the war ratings here. So he's for the first district, I think. Fifth. The fifth district is actually interestingly D plus 3.8. So apparently, either the Democrats did very well or Biggs did relatively poorly. But I think that at the end of the night, it would probably end up going to 2 to 5 points, which is actually relatively high, especially considering that she barely beat Carrie Lake. But with Trump's approval ratings at minus 11.4, 2024 voters, probably around -5 for the electorate, and then you have the fact that she's not very popular. So actually, probably would be bordering right around 2 points. Might be a little bit over, might be a little bit under. I'm gonna go and say a bit under. With that right there in Arizona. Nevada, the next door neighbor, even though this would be a pretty red environment, I think that Lombardo would probably win by a considerable amount. He's relatively well liked in the state. It's a very right trending state. Lombardo's all the way up here, 23%. He's right in the middle, tied for 17th. Nevada, it's minus 12.8 amongst 2024 voters, minus 6. That is actually the second highest out of all of them. So the only one's higher is Arizona. But here, minus 12.8. That is also, I believe, that's the third highest for all adults. So relatively well liked. Probably would actually end up by winning by just over 5 points. He flipped against incumbent Governor Sisolak. If he actually ends up running against Sisolak again, I expect it might actually be definitely on the higher end, almost 8-9 points. Just because rematches again don't go very well most of the time. But Lombardo is very popular. I expect that he's probably going to win re-election there. Going up the coast to Oregon, next we're going to be looking at Kotek. Tina Kotek is a relatively unpopular governor all the way down here at 48th. But there's not really much of a chance that she's not going to run for re-election. Two already have it up as likely Democrat, just because it's not that blue of a state. It is still blue trending, but it's not that blue of a state. I literally don't think I have anything. Yeah, I just have the PVI. So 15.8, that's relatively blue. So with that but they generally don't like their governor, so I think it'd probably only be 5 to 8 points. It wouldn't be necessarily concerningly close for the Democratic Party. They'd probably still be able to hold on relatively strongly, but that is really going to be the thing that ends it. So Alaska is going to be interesting here. If Mary Peltola does actually run, then absolutely this will go very, very close. Tom Begich also isn't that bad of a candidate either. And yeah, actually, he's the uncle of Nick Begich, who actually beat Peltola, which is kind of funny. But Tom Begich is a pretty strong candidate. He's probably both of these would be relatively strong against Mike Dunleavy if he runs again, which he's probably likely to, then it's going to be relatively close. But if Peltola runs as of right now, I mean, Alaska approval rating of Trump, so probably not anything that strong. Plus, you end up looking at can't find AK on here for some reason. Dunleavy's actually all the way down there at 11. But even then, I think he probably would win by probably around 8 to 11 points. He won his first term by 26. So that was mostly because of a split ticketing. If you look at that together, that's 44. So that would be 6 points. But if they end up running like that, then it could potentially end up getting down below 8 points. On a really good night, it would definitely be around 8 points, but just to balance out, then I was a bit conservative for Republicans there. I'm going to go a bit conservative for Democrats there and bring it a bit closer. So Minnesota, Tim Walz is actually probably going to do relatively well. He's probably going to get just over 8 points to get to likely. He just barely won by under that margin in 2022. He has some national effect. He's some national stage now. Minnesota's minus 11.8. In general, 15.6. So he's doing that's pretty strong. He's not that unpopular. He's 17 above water. That's not insanely poor. He'd probably improve by about half a point to a point or so on the margin. Here, this is interesting. Iowa, somewhat controversial, potentially, opinion here with the fact that Kim Reynolds is retiring. Relatively unpopular candidate. This is why I had Kansas open. Was just to point this out, and not for this, but because of 2018, which I wanted to go back to. But oh wow, that was actually close. I wanted to know where's 2018. If I can find 2018 on here, then that would be great. All right, I'm gonna search for that elsewhere. So, there we go. All right, I got it. So this was what was this is what's probably most comparable, is the 2018 Kansas election. Very unpopular governor leaving, right? You have the, and here's the weighting um, for statistics. Very unpopular governor that's leaving. You have very strong field here. If we look at the field in Iowa for governor, we have Rob Sand, who is literally the only Democrat who has won statewide in Iowa for a while. Lean R likely our battleground for inside elections, which is the only one of the few. They only give safer battleground as of right now. Toss up for race to the White House, but they're a bit more bullish on Democrats. But as of right now, End Citizens United, the organization, and Tim Walz have both endorsed Rob Sand. He is probably likely going to win, which means it's going to be a very tight election. So considering the fact that it doesn't really matter who it ends up being, these could end up also spending their war chest if the Democrats end up consolidating around Rob Sand first, assuming that this is a better scenario, then they're definitely going to end up potentially flipping Iowa, which is definitely going to be relatively difficult. That would take a lot of spending, but considering it's also less partisan on the gubernatorial level, I could see Iowa on a really good year if it ends up being like, a D plus 8 or something on the popular vote here. It was almost split. It was D plus 0.2 in 2022. But in 2018, it was D plus 3. So if it ends up being like D plus 4, and look, Reynolds only won by 2.7 in 2018. So it's definitely possible for Iowa to flip. So that's probably the craziest one that I have on this entire map, is going to be the flip in Iowa. Probably by very narrow amount, under 2 points. It would be very, very close, down to the wire. But that's going to be based off of lack of approval in Trump in general. Amongst 2024 voters, it's only plus 4.1. Very unpopular governor, the most unpopular in the country, and looking at what happened in Kansas. So, next, moving on to Wisconsin. Tony Evers is not term limited. There are no term limits in Wisconsin. He has said, I believe, that he is going to run again. No, he is not. Decision expected relatively soon, though. A random college student is apparently running. But, okay, good for him. Get politically involved, guys. But Brian Stale has turned down, and for Scott Walker, I believe, is the one who lost to Evers in 2018 as is, I think. Yes, okay, so he just declined against a rematch, which is a smart move. But most likely, Evers would actually win by over 5 points. He won by 3.4 in 2022, equal national popular vote. And he beat an incumbent by 1.1 when the Democrats were winning by 3. If we end up getting another D plus 3 environment, he could easily boost that by 3 points, which could easily be 6. So depending on how strong of a candidate it is, he's relatively well liked in the state of Wisconsin. Donald Trump is not. We just saw on that page. Tony Evers D plus 15, approve plus 15. So that's going to be relatively strong there. Michigan's weird because there's going to be a spoiler candidate situation going on there. That's pretty tough based on that. So that's going to be the difficult there. Gretchen Whitmer is term limited, and there's actually Mike Duggan. The best case scenario probably for Democrats would actually be the Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, probably would win there. Andy Levin wouldn't be poor candidate by any means. Gary Peters, if he had dropped down, that would have been good, but they all declined. John James potentially winning here would be really, really bad. This is a good pickup opportunity for the Republicans, but best case scenario would probably be something along the lines of relatively less well-known. Oh my. So, most likely would probably be somewhere like Eric Nesbitt winning, someone a bit less known than John James, who's definitely going to be a more formidable opponent. And the Democrats get someone like Gilchrist in there, but then also Mike Duggan drops out partway through. That would definitely end up leading to a relatively strong performance probably by, around 2 to 5 points or so. Ohio, this one's going to be relatively close, but best case scenario would obviously be now that DeWine is term limited. You have Vivek Ramaswamy is likely going to win that nomination. But the Democrats, the best case would definitely be Tim Ryan, because they'd want Sherrod Brown to run for the Senate again because he's already done that before. But Tim Ryan would definitely be the best shot here. Sherrod Brown beats all of them if they both go in, but that would be dumb. You'd want to save up your war chest as much as possible, especially considering that there might be a bit of a there's not going to be much of a contest here in the Republican primary. So Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be able to hold on to his cash. So that's going to be strong for him. And so with that, the Democrats are really going to have to be able to. Interestingly enough, Amy Acton actually was beating him by 1% here, but Ohio Department of Health. So that's going to be interesting to see. But hypothetical polling beats Tim Ryan by some varying percentages. But if you actually end up having Amy Acton, actually might end up being the best candidate. I'll have to look into that a bit more. But either way, the best case scenario, honestly, at this point, probably is still a narrow Republican victory, probably by close to about 2 points. But I mean, DeWine won in a huge landslide by 25 in 2022. And Trump is actually still narrowly approved by 2024 voters in Ohio, 1.6%. In general, 7 points, so it's probably going to be close to about -4 for this hypothetical electorate. So that's not going to be that poor of a performance there in Ohio. Georgia's another flip opportunity for the Democrats, completely depending on who they end up running. As it's only R+1. Bryant Kemp is term limited. Depends on who ends up running here. They have relatively strong candidates on the Republicans. If MTG ends up running, then obviously this is going to end up becoming like a likely blue state. But Chris Carr and Burt Jones are both very strong potential candidates. They're both very high up, but if they end up actually spending their war chests on each other, it looks like Chris Carr right now definitely has the upper hand. But if they end up actually fighting each other, then that's going to be helpful for the Democrats, especially if they can get behind one candidate. Now, Keisha Lance Bottoms is not that poor of a candidate. Former mayor of Atlanta, she's going to need as much support from Atlanta as she can get. State senator from the 6th district is going to be here. State representative, candidate for lieutenant governor, and Derek Jackson. So those are all relatively strong candidates. Hypothetical polling, Stacey Abrams versus anyone else is going to be a really weird one. But Stacey Abrams, the one that lost to Kemp both times, including in 2018. In the blue wave year, Kemp managed to win by 1.4. So very poor candidate choice in Abrams. But as of right now, it'd probably be somewhere in the 2 to 5 point range. That's actually not far enough apart. I can't really tell those apart. So I'm going to bump that a little bit. Now it's a bit better. Maybe whiten this a little bit more. So, there we go. And then finally, we're going to go down to Florida. Florida is basically a very right trending state at this point in time. It hasn't really been ever since Ron DeSantis narrowly managed to win again in 2018. It's basically been a very right red state for a long time. He won re-election by 19.4 in 2022 versus Charlie Crist, who's actually a relatively strong Democratic candidate. Jason Pizzo apparently is running, but depending on who ends up running here, Casey DeSantis might end up running. She's been doing relatively well with some hypothetical polling here. Casey DeSantis, generic Republican versus generic Democrats, R+7, but that was a while ago. That was even before Election Day 2024. Casey DeSantis versus Daniela Levine Cava, which is apparently going to be the mayor of Miami-Dade County, which kind of makes sense. That's going to be a city county. Really Nixon, but David Jolly, former representative from the 13th district. He lost to Luna, I believe, in 2022, probably. No, maybe in 2020. No, there's Christ again, so I don't even know how long ago he would have been. So, that'd be probably a relatively strong candidate. David Jolly not is a relatively strong candidate in his own right. It's just the Republicans just do too well here. Most likely that'd probably end up being, a not that strong of a performance, probably about 5 to 8 points at worst case. But it's a very right trending state. Most likely it'd be close to 8 or 9. Up in New Hampshire, we have the re-election most likely of Kelly Ayotte. She won by a good bit in 2024. That was by a relatively impressive 9.3 point margin. Chris Sununu is done as governor. She's not stated whether or not yet she will run for governor, but there's basically nobody. They have a former state senator for the Democrats, but this is just a 2-term cycle, so most likely she'd actually win by just under 10 points, if not a little bit more. So that's going to be actually a safe state there. And then finally, the Democrats are going to hold on in Maine, most likely, even though Janet Mills is term limited. The Democratic primary, they have Angus King III, who is the son of Angus King, the senator there. Very large name recognition, which we've seen just a few nights ago, is a huge game changer. And Republicans don't have that much right now. I mean, they have the nephew of George H.W. Bush. So that's going to be the brother of W. Bush. But they really aren't, there's not that strong of a field here. So that's probably going to end up being best case scenario, probably just around 10 points. So to finish off the governor's map, we have 25 to 25 tie with flips in Iowa and Georgia for the Democrats here. Best case would probably be flipping in Ohio, but as of right now, it doesn't look like we would end up seeing that by any means. And so that's what we're going to be seeing for right now, is just going to be that 25 for the governors. All right, finish up the Senate. I'm actually going to skip the House because that's very that's very specified based off of the candidates and stuff, which we have basically none of yet. But most likely the Democrats would take the House back almost certainly at this point right now. And I mean, they're only down by 6 seats, I think. If they won 6 seats, then they'd flip it. So, that would literally be these 3 in Pennsylvania, which would be likely to flip. They'd likely to flip Iowa's first. Nebraska's second, especially now that Bacon retired. Van Orden would likely lose. Evans might lose. Ciscomani leaving leaves that seat open. And Biggs leaving leaves that seat open because it's actually that strong of a swing. Calver, Valadeo, so Zinke, Nunn, John James leaving leaves that seat open. Barrett is still potentially up there. Lawler could potentially lose. Keene, Fitzpatrick could potentially lose, even though he did vote against HR 1, so that might give him a bit of a bonus there. Kiggins, Whitman, McGuire. So there's a lot of candidates out there that could potentially lose. Almost the entirety of North Carolina could, in theory, go blue if it was enough of a dummy mander here. Huge blue surge. So yeah, there's a lot that, especially Luna. So there's a lot that still could happen, but in most likely, I mean, the generic congressional vote is only D plus 2.7 right now. So if it happened right now, it wouldn't be that big. The Republicans won the congressional vote by 3. So if we just want to quickly hypothesize a bit, that would be what, like 3 points or something like that. So it'd be like a 3.5 point shift. So there you go. Those wouldn't flip. That wouldn't flip. That would be a flip. That would be a flip. That would be a flip. That would stay. Flip. That would stay. That would flip. So not really all that much happening here. I'm not seeing much of anything else right now. So yeah, that's really what we'd have if it happened right now. We had the exact same candidates. Now, of course, Don Bacon would actually end up obviously is retired, so that would be different. And Texas would probably rush to finalize their redrawn maps. and all of that. There's a bit more distinction going on here, but for the most part, that would really be all that happened. The Democrats would lead the House by 15 seats. So, with that, then we move on to the Senate. Real quick, let's get this down. The seats that are going to be going by 11 or more points are going to be the states of Oregon. That's going to be Merkley by probably about 17 points or so. He won by 17. He'd probably be winning by a bit more than that, actually. And then you go down to Illinois, another very safe blue state. Dick Durbin's retiring, but there's no real competition there. Very blue state in general. I don't know who's actually, if they have anyone who's. Yeah, they have a few candidates here, but none of them. A lieutenant governor of Illinois is running. She's probably gonna end up running. She's probably gonna end up winning the nomination. No real strong Republicans as of right now, so that is definitely going to be probably a safe blue state on an election night like this that we're having hypothesized. Cory Booker would win re-election by a good bit. In Delaware, you'd have Coons win re-election as well. Reed is a huge overperformer. Markey is probably going to do relatively well in this situation as well. So those are going to be the safe states for the Democrats. That's going to be bringing their total up to 40 seats. Republicans are going to do pretty well across basically the entire country here. All of them are going to be winning by 11 or more points in those states. I didn't mean to do that. So then we have 40 to 42. The Republicans take the lead. Kansas is the only state that had a presidential result under 15 in the past 2 cycles out of all of these states. So, and that was by 14.9 for Trump in 2020. So those are really going to be pretty strong. Hickenlooper is probably going to actually win by over 11 now that I think about it. It's a re-election campaign. It's going to be even bluer than 2020 because they actually won the Republicans actually won, but I expect it to be a bit bluer, not by that much because they don't have Florida, which really shifts a good bit. They don't have California, which there's a lot of movement for. They don't have New York, which has a lot of potential movement. The largest state is Texas, which does move a good bit. And considering the fact that it could in 2026 end up going a bit redder like it did from 2022 to 2024, that could definitely end up moving things around a bit. New Mexico. Lujan isn't a strong candidate by any means, but it's not. They're not necessarily a poor candidate. Again, as we put right here, 5 points with the war rating, very pretty pretty poor performance below standard, but not a bad candidate by any means. Could end up winning by around 8-9 points on a good night. Minnesota, the exact same sort of thing. There's no real strong candidates. Tina Smith is retiring, so that is definitely going to hurt the Democrats here by every means. But look at this predictions. There it is. So you have Tina Smith retiring, of course, the DFL because it's Minnesota. But Penny Flanagan's most likely going to end up winning there. Royce White, who ran against Amy Klobuchar, most likely going to win that one. That's probably not going to go all that well. Probably going to be a likely rating 8 to maybe around 10 points even, which is going to be better than Smith did on a really, really good night. Because if you look at, what happened in 2018, Smith actually won by 10.7. So maybe probably around 10 points if you look at that again. So that's really going to be a strong performance for the Democrats there. As you can see, Virginia would be definitely over 11. I mean, Warner won by 12.1 last time. Most likely would expand on his margin again. He's not retiring, so that would probably end up being pretty strong in this situation, Mark Warner. The only thing that could get anywhere close is Glenn Youngkin, but Kim Farrington's literally the only person that's stepped in so far, and she's literally just a financial accountant, so there's not really much of a shot here that's going to flip red. Next, Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, which is a huge blow to Democrats as well, but then the back blow from the Republicans was that Chris Sununu decided to not run, and so did Kelly Ayotte. So then we have Scott Brown, who was a former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. He narrowly won the special election for that in 2013. or sorry, in 2010, which was a huge red wave year, again, but it was a special election. It was completely different. So, but that flipped the seat. Warren actually flipped it. So then, right, we're on New Hampshire. So, I was wondering on why on earth I was on Massachusetts. So Scott Brown, relatively strong, but Chris Pappas is the stronger of the two House candidates here. The war rating, if you look down at New Hampshire, I'm gonna actually scroll so we get there faster. Um, you actually have there they are, 3.2 for the first, which is Papa's district, and Goodlanders is only 1.7. So this was definitely the better shot out of the two. So then you end up actually having a relatively strong performance, 7.8 based on that. So that's going to end up being a lean probable, which is going to be probably around 5 to 8 points. He's not necessarily a poor candidate by any means, but that would do relatively well there. Now that you end up with Collins, who's doing relatively poorly. I mean, her approval rating is pretty bad at this point in time. I don't have any approval ratings, but I don't think we even have anything here either from any of these. You just have we're gonna get back to this when we get to Texas, but here we have James versus Benson versus Duggan. We actually do still have the Democrats winning, so a lot of those you do actually have some confirmation that the Democrats might actually end up being able to pull out a win there. Collins versus Ossoff, he's winning by 3, so we're going to be getting to Georgia in a minute as well. But Maine definitely would be a narrow flip. Collins continually just does well, even though everyone constantly predicts that she's going to lose. She won by like 9 she won by 8.5 when everyone expected that Gideon would be here by about 9. So that's 17-point error and also 17-point split ticket voting, so that's a relatively strong performance there. But she would probably end up losing by about 2 to 5 points on a good night for the Democrats. Ohio would probably actually flip on a really good night with Sherrod Brown in that seat. Probably another 2 to 5 point victory. This is a special election, so it's not going to show up on there. But Tim Ryan lost by 6.1 to Vance. Brown only lost by 3.6. So but Brown won by 6.8 in 2018. That was a 20-point victory. But then again, you also do have California on here, and that was all Democratic votes. And you also have Gillibrand winning by 34. So those also very good performances for the Democrats in Florida and Texas. But still, you do end up having a potential flip opportunity there for the Democrats if Sherrod Brown does get into the race. But his window is actually closing. So that is actually going to end up being very difficult. Plus, Houston is actually a relatively strong candidate in his own right. It just depends if Sherrod Brown does step into the race. He won't have to contest Tim Ryan. And Casey Weinstein is going to run if Sherrod Brown doesn't run. That would probably be the best candidate if Brown doesn't run, but at that point, the window for being able to win that seat almost basically completely closes for Democrats. Michigan, Gary Peters has retired, and so now he is going to retire. And so now we have another open seat there, Democratic primary. You have El Sayed, who's actually doing very well in the current standings. Mike Rogers actually isn't that poor of a candidate, but if you look at the hypothetical polling, I mean, Mike Rogers, Stevens is the one who's actually winning. Mike Rogers is actually doing pretty well, but Haley Stevens is actually able to beat basically Mike Rogers each and every time, and even then there's a good bit of an undecided vote, but still that would be relatively good on a good night for Democrats. That would definitely end up being closer to a 5 to 8 point victory. So that would probably end up being a 5 to 8 point victory on a good night. North Carolina would definitely flip on a good night, probably by not that much though. The last time it went blue was in 2008. Kay Hagan flipped it against Elizabeth Dole, and then Tom Tillis beat Hagan and was reelected in 2020 by 1.7%. He is now retiring, so that's going to be an open seat there. If this is probably a tilt, as I've said before, it's a tilt blue seat for the most part. Wiley Nichols said he's going to actually drop out if Roy Cooper runs. Roy Cooper actually, if he does run, then this is definitely going to flip to be tilt blue. but if Lara Trump ends up actually running, then it actually might end up getting a bit tighter, though. Um, Trump actually did endorse her relatively recently. So then, with all of that, we do have the South Carolina is actually going to be just under 11. Relatively poor performer. Grammarly won by under 11 in 2020. Expected to probably be closer to around 8 points. It's actually a relatively strong candidate against him in the first place. So that kind of helped a bit. But Lindsey Graham does end up running again. He actually does have some challengers, so that could actually help the Democrats a little bit. They're definitely not going to. Joe Walsh could definitely actually end up running. He did change to be a Democrat, but he could, in theory, actually end up putting up a good fight here, get it under 10 points. But they would not win this. Same sort of thing in Mississippi. Hyde-Smith's a very poor candidate, won by 9.98 in 2020. Hyde-Smith doesn't do very, very well, and so she's most likely going to win. There's not really any strong candidates from the Democrats, but you do end up having probably a not very strong performance there for the Republicans on a good night. In Nebraska, on a very, very good night, the independent Dan Osborne would absolutely actually win this one. I mean, he almost beat Deb Fischer, and that was in 2024 with a relatively poor performance across the board for the Democrats. And so that would be, and he's officially announced that he is running again not that long ago. So he's already also starting to fill in a war chest here against incumbent Senator Pete Ricketts. So he could absolutely flip that seat. I'm not going to bother doing that because I want the arrow, but that would absolutely be interesting here. If John Tester stepped into the race in Montana against Daines, he could narrow it down. He actually did decline. Okay, so Riley Neal, formal state representative. There's really not much of a contest here. In theory, if Tester had jumped in, then he definitely could have narrowed it a little bit, but it's going to be over 11 points here. The only reason that he didn't win by a lot was because Steve Bullock was a Democratic governor, so he had a lot of name recognition. But I expect that Daines would probably win by about 12 to 13, even on a good night for the Democrats. Alaska would actually probably flip. If you actually had Mary Peltola running here on the if you had Mary Peltola running on a really good night, it would probably actually end up being very, very close. But if you had Bigich running, then against Sullivan, he probably actually might end up flipping the seat. This one's actually more flippable than the governor. Just because of the fact that it's actually a continually blue trending state. If you look at the war, it's going to be down to 9. If you look at the Democratic Party, Tom Bigich, very strong candidate. Mary Peltola is more likely to run for governor at this point. Dan Sullivan does have a strong war chest though, so that's going to be very, very close. I don't know why on earth they have Tilt R. But if you look at Mary Peltola, actually was beating Dan Sullivan in the one poll here that was done, because it was a very, very long time ago. And that was back when she was the House rep. But this would probably actually be very, very close. That would be down to the wire, around 2 points on a very, very good night for Democrats. But more likely than anything, it would probably be down to around the same margin as it'd be more of a fool's gold thing for the Democrats, being down below 5 points, but not actually flipping. In Texas, we have Colin Allred running again for the Democrats. He did relatively well. His war rating was relatively high. Texas actually down to 4.1 with the war rating in here, interestingly enough. Colin Allred is most likely going to win the nomination here. He did pretty well against Cruz. He only lost by 8.5, just under 1 million votes in 2024. If we get more, excuse me, I don't know what the war rating for Texas 2018 was. Probably pretty low as well. But if we get more of a 2018 environment against him for that, he could definitely end up narrowing down this even closer, potentially even flipping the state. But it'd probably be pretty close to about Alaska, which is still relatively concerning for the Republicans in and of itself. Florida would definitely do a lot better. Ashley Moody is a relatively strong candidate. She won along with Ron DeSantis in a strong election. So Ashley Moody here is going to be most likely going to win in this race here. And Josh Whale is actually going to be running. He's the one that lost the special election. He's a pretty strong candidate. So interestingly enough, you actually could probably get a relatively narrow margin here, probably just around 6 points. Not going to be ridiculously competitive, but still pretty concerningly low for Florida for anything for the past. Scott won by 12.8 when it was looking competitive, and Rubio won by 16.4 in 2022. So the last time was anything close to that was Scott flipping the seat in 2018 in the first place, where he then improved his margin by 12.7%. But Ashley Moody would probably end up winning this seat. Ossoff is a very strong candidate. I wouldn't be surprised if he won by almost 7 points. If we look at the war rating involved, it actually ended up being 4 points. 2.4, interestingly enough, but the war rating here, 6.1 for this race. And so Buddy Carter is actually a pretty strong candidate. That's why it was the 2.4 in there. Buddy Carter's a pretty strong candidate. He's most likely going to be the one that's going to end up being the candidate there against Ossoff. Kemp said he's not going to run, so Buddy Carter's most likely going to be one there. He's from the 1st Congressional District, so he's going to retire there, but Ossoff is basically going to win right here. He has a very large war chest, $15.5 million. He's already spent $31 million. He's a very strong fundraiser, so I'd be very surprised if he lost, especially considering that he managed to win, defeating an incumbent in a year where the national environment wasn't that strong towards Democrats. Here, if we look at the expected, it was actually he won by 3.7 more than expected performance. So compared to the nation, it was actually 3.5 to the left, and considering the PVI is 0.2, he actually did 3.7 points better than expected. So again, that's really going to end up benefiting the Democrats here. They're going to probably be able to carry this state relatively easily. And then finally, to finish up in Iowa, Joni Ernst is very unpopular as well. So this is really going to end up being a strong opportunity. She might end up retiring. It's not completely concerned yet. She hasn't officially announced whether or not she's going to run, but the Democrats have Nathan Sage and J.D. Schulten as well as Zach Walz. All of them are relatively strong candidates. None of them are insanely strong, but she's barely winning against a generic Democrat. She's relatively not that liked. Iowa does not approve of Trump, only by the 2024 voters, only by 4.1. So with this, it would probably actually end up being a flip in Iowa, which would actually be very interesting. On a very, very good night for Democrats, they could actually end up flipping it. Again, the last time the Democrat was elected here was in 2008. Which would be interesting because that's also the exact same cycle that we're looking at here with Cornyn as well, but we had quite a few different names in here than we used to, but it would be interesting if, again, we actually had a flip in North Carolina and Iowa. We actually had Democrats in Montana, South Dakota, which is crazy to see. There is, in fact, I believe, Tom Bigich in Alaska, but that would probably be a narrow flip in Iowa by under 2 points or so against, and that would only be if Ernst stays in the race. And so in this environment where they'd end up winning by almost 8, it's basically the national environment. Collins still then won by 23, but you'd end up with a strong performance for all of them. And so you'd end up with a final total here in the Senate actually being 51-48-1 for the independents. That would be a lean, maybe probable margin for Osborne. I was thinking Ossoff, but that was Georgia. For Osborne, probably right around 5-6 points. For him there, basically the inverse of the margin that he lost by in 2024. So to finish things off, it would be 25-25 for the governors, and it would be 51-48 in the Senate. If we were seeing these numbers that we're seeing right now for approval rating, congressional vote, and things continue as of right now. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. It was another long one, but I was trying to get all the information in that I could. I'll probably actually get a bit more in depth into it in the next episode of Today in Politics, which will be coming out Obviously at some point next week, but I think probably I'll do it right around a week after the last one. So um, that would probably be on maybe Monday or Tuesday. I'm not 100% sure yet. But again, thank you all very much for watching, especially if you watched all the way through, and have a fantastic rest of your day.